Ladies and gentlemen, we now present a ceremony for a man that to take his well-deserved place into a Hall of Fame, but not just any Hall of Fame, the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. And this man's resume is as worthy as anybody's out there that should be in a Hall of Fame. Starting out in 2000, 23 years, he has dedicated his life to the world of professional wrestling. 19 of those years in a company called All Star Wrestling, where in All Star Wrestling, he wrestled a who's who of people, defeated a who's who of people, including the likes of Bryan Danielson on multiple occasions. Probably heard of him. Also, he's wrestled the likes of Jushin Thunder Liger. Also has a victory over him. Wrestled against and alongside the likes of Carlito, Chris Masters, Gangrel, and many other people that have competed in the British professional wrestling scene. And he's also, by the way, went to places such as France, Italy, Japan, and most notably, he wrestled in a little company called Total Non-Stop Action Wrestling, where in 2004, that fateful summer, he wrestled there on multiple occasions on their world pay-per-view. And he's also been a teacher, a trainer, a coach, and a mentor, most notably for his own school for well over a decade. He trained a who's who of people, and including a very good friend of ours, a mutual friend named Luke Hardy, a.k.a. Mr. Luke Leyland, who, by the way, I may have an announcement for coming up real soon on Sportswire Radio. And by the way, our guest, our next Hall of Famer, also taught somebody that is the current AEW Women's World Champion, Timeless Toni Storm. All of this has certainly made him as to why, when I put together this Hall of Fame, he was at the top of my list. And also, I had the big honor of having him on this show. I could speak many more things about him. I could tell you to go subscribe to his YouTube page, his Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and I'll probably do that anyway. But I think it's time to get it over because I've talked way too much about him, because he's going to want to see me talk about what he's up to right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the newest member of the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. He's my inspiration. He's your inspiration. If you're a wrestler watching this show, he's definitely your inspiration. He is Mr. Jumping Dean Allmark. While I'm about to congratulate him, I have to do what I always do best. And when he got the first time here, I have to give him that introduction that everybody else always gets. And especially, oh, by the way, the man that came on last who was inducted into the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame, who I'm going to ask about very, very shortly. So with that, without further ado, here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, the newest member of the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame, Jonathan Dean Allmark. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You know, I kept going on and on. I was like, we did it with RPD. It was almost, I felt like I got it perfect. Now, I'm not saying this one didn't do poorly because you are Dean Allmark, but I was like, I could have talked more about you. But then I was like, well, it's an introduction, not a 25-minute soliloquy back when I was in communications class in college. So I hope I got it right. I hope you enjoyed it, but certainly I hope it feels good that you're a part of a Hall of Fame. And I was kind of wondering, when I put this list together, are you in a Hall of Fame at the moment?
Good question. Maybe. I'm not saying I'm
Maybe.
definitely not, but like I don't want to forget anybody, so I'm gonna just stick with
Yeah,
yeah.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I was thinking about this is a good one because RPD definitely wasn't in the Hall of Fame. By that I knew. Bentley we're inducting in 2 weeks, and Bentley we announced him on the air when we brought you up, and then he was like, "Well, no, I'm not." But then with you, it kind of you'd have to think about it because you have wrestled over 3,000 matches, you have traveled all over the world, you have pretty much wrestled a who's who of people. I probably left out like 13 or 14 other names. Doug Williams obviously comes to mind. I mean, Paul Burchill. I mean, there's a long list of other people I could have brought up, but again, it's only an introduction. But yeah, well, congratulations nonetheless. You might be in the Hall of Fame. I hope it's as memorable as this one. But nevertheless, there's a lot to talk about here. I don't want to make this about the Sportswire Radio's Hall of Fame. I want to talk about the news that we saw recently, literally just before we went on the air. Certainly, you know how to make a grand entrance, Dean Allmark, because we're going to see you do some coaching once again. And you kind of alluded to it on this show a few months back, the first time you came on. And you alluded to it on social media last week. Something might be dropping, and you certainly have something to drop about. So for those that are listening and watching here on Sportswire Radio, Dean Allmark, everybody's wrestler's inspiration and influence, you certainly have made a grand entrance back into coaching. And tell us all about it and what we can expect.
So yeah, the news has broken. I'm really excited to be teaching at the Claw Wrestling School in Liverpool. Um, this was meant to happen actually before lockdown. Obviously, that came along and ruined all our plans. And they've spent so much time getting the facility ready. They've got two rings there. They've got a matted area. They've got weights. It just looks like a tremendous place to teach at. And obviously, I'm really passionate about teaching. I've been teaching pretty much since 2006. My school actually closed around about 2 years ago now.
Yeah, we spoke about that the first time. We spoke about the fact that you were had the school for almost 14 years, right before COVID, just about 13 or 14 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, of which like I taught every single week without fail.
And you
Uh,
wrestled on top of that. Remember, we spoke the first time, and you were like, you'd wrestle a few times or more throughout the week, and you still made time on those Saturdays to go train and have sessions. And obviously, Mr. Hardy was a part of some of those, wink, wink. But I mean, that was kind of the like you basically, no matter what, always made time to teach. You said it the first
yeah,
time you were here.
yeah. And as soon as the school would finish at like 4 o'clock, I'd shoot off and go to a show at night on a Saturday night. So yeah, it's tough schedule.
Well,
It's
listen,
it,
it's funny. I think my schedule is tough sometimes, and I was like, kind of like trying to figure out, am I going to get up for this? But I'm like, well, it's Dean Allmark, and he wrestled 3,000 times in 19 years, and I'm going to complain about my schedule, which is pretty much I'm sleeping between 3 and 5 hours a day, and it's Dean Allmark, so he's not going to accept it. He's not going to tolerate it. So I'm going to make sure I'm at my A game because he did it for all those years, and he's still doing
yeah, just about. It was a lot easier when I was younger, I'll tell you that.
it. So I'm curious then you're going back into teaching, and it's obviously not through your school, but it's through call wrestling. And talk about that and kind of what do you want to teach or give back to these students, maybe that you did or didn't do in the first incarnation?
So yeah, this is a different point in my life. Yeah, my old school and my old wrestling promotion are they're like another lifetime ago now. They're part of my old life. This is the new me. This is my new life now. And I feel like at this stage, I'm at a stage where I just really want to give back to wrestling. Like wrestling's given me so much over the years, and it's taken me to so many places that I just feel like it's time where I start to give people like give wrestling something back, you know. And there's a lot of talent on the British wrestling scene, but I feel like I could bring more talent to the wrestling scene. Like you mentioned Tony before, like I think there's the stars just waiting to be born, and I feel like I can make that happen, not just for wrestling, but for those people as well. I want people to go through what I've been through, and I want wrestling to take people places that it's taken me. You know, I've been on 3 tours of Japan, and I don't think I would ever have been to Japan if it wasn't for wrestling. So And definitely, I probably would have gone to America, but I wouldn't have gone to Nashville, which was pretty cool.
I did. I always
Yeah,
have to bring that because again, obviously that's. I mean, there's a lot of things you're going to be known for in your career. Obviously, Brian Danielson, certainly Jushin Thunder Liger. Obviously, you kind of posted on Twitter about the 10-year mark when you basically you wrestled him, and certainly the move set, and you've defeated him. And you've wrestled countless other people that have been in the WWE and outside of it. Jonathan Gresham, you wrestled him, for the Ring of Honor World Title. I mean, you've done a lot. But I think what's always relevant about you most, and what I appreciate that you just said, because I always feel like you should still want to stay fresh. You should always want to stay in the current. And that's why I kind of said, segueing you from the Hall of Fame to now, is that there are things to talk about, and there's still a lot to do. And, I'm so glad you brought up the British wrestling scene, because obviously I've been covering it for 3 years pretty much. And I think there is a lot of talent that maybe outside of the UK or maybe even inside the UK, I think doesn't get the attention it deserves. And you've been able to kind of go out there. Chris Ridgway, your old opponent, Nemesis, he's also done it, but I think you've done it on a slightly grander scale that I don't think a lot of those talent gets the recognition that they deserve. And I think by you coming back, maybe that could very well be the biggest contribution to this sport that you're going to give here in this second incarnation of coaching. How do you feel about that?
yeah, and I feel like as my career starts to slow down, obviously I'm not as active in the ring as I used to be, by choice.
Well, I
Well,
mean, you did, to be fair, before lockdown, again, as I continue to preface this, you wrestled basically 300 matches a year for 19 years. And I just saw on Twitter, they made a big post about Dominic Mysterio has wrestled 100 matches this year. And I was like, well, Dean, who's coming on here to Sportswire, has wrestled 300 plus matches for give or take between 15 to 19 years. Then they said the person who had the most matches of the year in WWE was Cody Rhodes, who had 102. And I'm still like, well, if I put Cody and Dom together, that still is fewer matches than Dean wrestled on average per year for like almost 20 years. So, I mean, like, I would obviously think eventually you're not going to be able to wrestle every match every year the way you did for all those years, literally. And they're making a big deal about these guys who wrestled still in a given year between the two of them fewer matches than you did, sir.
yeah, it's crazy. Like in the summertime, I used to wrestle 60
Multiple
times
times, yeah, multiple
in
times a day.
in 6 weeks. My schedule was 60 shows in 60 weeks, and sometimes I'd wrestle like 2 or 3 times on those shows. So when you're wrestling that kind of schedule, just the match tally just goes up and up. So yeah, suffering with a bit of an injury at the minute. I've hurt a disc in my back.
Don't give away too much to your opponents, because eventually I'm sure you'll be
Oh
back.
yeah, it's fine. It doesn't affect me. Once I'm in the ring, you don't know. It's
Well,
just the rest of the time.
kind of
If you
like
see me
almost.
after the show, like you'll see me limping to my car. That's the time when you're going to be like, "Oh, he looks injured." But
Well,
like,
it's funny. I want to say hello to one of my lovely listeners out there in Brooklyn, New York, a lovely wrestling fan, a friend of mine, you might want to say, maybe hopefully more than a friend one day. A lovely woman named Zena, and she's saying, "Wow," she's a big wrestling fan. She was like, "Wow, you wrestled 300 matches." Because I was telling her about you. I was telling her, about you, basically a living legend. You've wrestled on, in Impact Wrestling. You've wrestled in Japan. You've wrestled guys who are in the WWE Hall of Fame. You've wrestled the Ring of Honor World Champion Jonathan Gresham when he held the title. And she's like, wow, 300 matches a year. And I was like, no, what Dean was able to do, really, you're kind of like remarkable. You're kind of almost like the invincible man. But in some ways, I can certainly sympathize with you on the injury limping, because a lot of times I go into these interviews and I'm like half asleep, I'm dead tired. Then all of a sudden, it's like you put the cape on, and it's like you forget all about it. It's that adrenaline rush that kind of almost carries you into just being in those 10 minutes, and nothing hurts, nothing else is not a care in the world almost.
yeah, and I always preface Clark Kent and Superman. Like for the most percent of my time, I'm like Clark Kent outside of the ring, a bit of an idiot, a bit goofy. But then when I get my wrestling gear on, I suddenly change into Superman, and I feel invincible. So yeah, I see why now. Like wrestlers when they get older, they're so so frustrated about having to let it go, you know.
Well, because it's almost like you did something and you did something, and then it's almost like, okay, well, what do I do now? It's almost work in life. Let's say you're a police officer. Let's say you're a teacher. Let's say you're a doctor. Okay, you do that till, whatever, you're 60, 70 years old, but you're an athlete. You were an athlete doing something that's extremely extraordinary. You're doing something that people dream of. You're doing something that people wish they could be like you on. So it's almost like when it comes to a point where the body kind of tells you, gives you that signal that you can't do it, you're still relatively a young person. You don't go out and become a normal person in society, or what people's society's terms are. It's almost like you have to come with to grips. And what do you do with yourself after basically knowing that you can't do what you did for all those years, especially you? I mean, you wrestled literally multiple times a day. You and your style, you wrestled pretty much everybody that would be considered to be a measuring stick that would come into this country, and you were kind of that guy. So I think it is really a tough kind of adjustment to kind of figure out what do you do, or if you want to stay in this sport, what do you exactly do?
Yeah, and I think that's where the coaching comes along, and Claw is a perfect fit for me. And on days where I can't get in the ring and wrestle and give my all in a wrestling ring, I can give my all at a wrestling school, giving my gifts and knowledge to somebody that can just go and live that life just like I did. So I just feel like it's coaching is like a natural progression from wrestling. Obviously, a lot of people do it. Some people do it for the right reasons. Some people do it for the wrong reasons. Obviously, I'm not going to judge, but for me, I just feel like it's all for the right reasons, and it's just all about giving back.
No question about it. And I want to give a big plug actually to Claw, because you can follow them on Twitter at Claw Wrestling. You also check them out on Instagram as well. They were established in 2020 to help out for the wrestling and MMA to the Liverpool community. They're in Liverpool at Liverpool Armill Road, Crow XTETH LTL114TR. You can go to info at Claw Training co.uk for more information. That is info at claw-training.co.uk. And they were established right in the middle of COVID, and also support them. They also have a big training class coming on today with somebody I know very well, Mr. Soner Durson. We know Soner Durson very well, and he's training today from 6:30 to 8:30. So right after you listen to Dean, go out there if you're in the Liverpool area and catch a session. It's only 15 pounds. Only 15 pounds for a beginner session. Think about this, right? You go to the movies, you want to go buy Napoleon. Like I saw Napoleon, didn't like it. I spent 20 plus bucks. You go out there, you spend it a meal. Maybe you go out there and go have a couple of drinks. You're going to spend 3-4 times that. You go here, get yourself in shape, learn a couple moves, see some different great wrestlers who've done all the great things they're doing, like a Dean Allmark, like a Sona Durson. And on Mondays, we're going to see Lizzie Evo. Lizzie Evo, I know Lizzie Evo really well. So that's 6:30 to 8:30. You're going to be doing Wednesday, 6:30 to 8:30. You got Sona today at 6:30 to 8:30. You're doing every Wednesday on top of that. So definitely, please go out there and support Claw Wrestling. So if you're out there, make sure you support them. And of course, Dean Allmark, our newest member of the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame, is going to be everybody's favorite teacher, everybody's favorite coach, because, well, he was everybody's favorite wrestler and inspiration. So we've got that out of the way. I definitely want to come back to that. I want to talk about some wrestling. Before I get to a wrestler that came on last week and said a few things about you, I want to talk about some current events also related to the world of wrestling. And you, sir, because you wrestled in October, Tommy Tango. And Tommy, we saw obviously this past week at Top Row Wrestling. And I was wondering, Tommy Tango, another young and up-and-coming star, and what was that experience like wrestling him and being back in the ring in October? Because we were speaking with you, and I'd ask you, well, what's the future for Dean Allmark? What's left? What's left to do? And you were like, no. I got some stuff going on. You didn't tell us because obviously you got to keep everything secret. So obviously the fans can go out there and buy a ticket. But, talk about Tommy Tango. What was it like wrestling him?
Tommy Tango is a great young wrestler. I once did a seminar in Newcastle at the Battle Ready Wrestling School, and he was one of the students there. So
Wow.
going up against him on this show, he kind of tried to use some of those tricks that I taught him against me. So yeah, but it was a good match. It was almost like a classic British wrestling match, and It was at Middlesbrough Town Hall for First Class Wrestling. And I'd say I really enjoyed it. The fans seemed like they really enjoyed it. Tango seemed really complimentary after the match. He seemed like he enjoyed it. So, yeah, overall it went really well. I got the win, of course.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, I was
Yeah.
hoping to hear that you would have got the win. I'll come back to that in a second, but you said classic British style of wrestling and almost takes me back in a way. I mean, you're going to probably, say, well, did you really bring that up? But I'm going to say almost like a World of Sport type of match in a way, kind of with some of those
Yeah, pretty
rivalries.
much. And it was just a lot of sportsmanship, a lot of mat wrestling, some of the stuff that you used to see like on World of Sport.
Or
That's our
also
style.
some of
That's what
what
we
we
do.
saw with you and Jonathan Gresham a little bit also.
Yeah, pretty much in a similar vein to that type of match. Yeah, and it's really fun. And one of the most satisfying things as like a 40-year-old wrestler in the UK now is seeing all these young guys come through and getting put against them. And I think he said, I think he said he was like one when I first started wrestling. He was 1 years old. So yeah, so it's interesting
Well,
for me
that's like
because
my
like
friend, the lovely Zena. She must have been like 4 when you started. I mean, I'm obviously a little, she's probably was like 4 years old when you started in the ring, this young lady. So
yeah, made
what
me
a
sound
small
old.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's not Dean
yeah.
Allmark. You don't look old, so that's certainly
Oh,
not a
thank you very
good
much.
thing. But obviously, I guess what I will say in a way to kind of tie back to Tommy, and I want to tie back to somebody else I know very well that you just wrestled. I'll talk about that also. But I think in a way, it's kind of like a circle of life. It almost reminds me of the Elton John song, "The Circle of Life." It reminds me of my 5th grade graduation, The Lion King, and it was the Circle of Life. And in a way, when you started back in 2000, I remember speaking with you the first time. We were speaking about all these legends and all these different people, and we talked about the tape trading and going to the market and finding these different places. But now here you are. You're kind of the guy that they watch. You're like the tape trader. There's no tape trading these days, no VHSs, but you're the guy that they go on YouTube. They go on your YouTube channel, which is the link, by the way. If you Zena, you're out there, go out and subscribe to Dean Allmark's YouTube page. Watch some of his matches in action. But I mean, it's almost like now it's all come around where they've watched you, and now you're the one that's kind of training them and teaching them, and they've seen you firsthand, and it is kind of to me like a circle of life. Do you feel that way as well?
Yeah, totally. And I remember first coming in as like a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid and seeing all these grown men on shows, like all these guys like over 40 and they seemed really old to me at the time. And here I am now as
Well, I
a
feel like though when I
40-year-old
feel like
man.
when we were growing up though, like 40, 45, 50 was like it was like, wow, really old. I remember like my father being like in his 40s, and I was like, wow, he's an old man. He's getting gray hair, and his hair's graying. But then like today, it's almost like, well, we see WWE, and I mean, listen, Bobby Lashley's 46. He looks as better than he ever has. I mean Flair. I mean Flair is Flair. I mean Sting looks great. I mean he was in the UK earlier this year for the Love of Wrestling. He's like 64, is in phenomenal shape. I mean Jericho. So is in his 50s and he looks great. I mean, so I think now, I guess maybe in a way, maybe because we're getting in our 30s at least, or you've made 40. I'm a few years behind you, but at least at the end of the day, it's not old anymore. Maybe if that's kind of the way, maybe to make you feel better, sir.
Not really. No, I've accepted the fact that I'm 40 now, but it's really satisfying because I wrestle these younger guys and they're a lot better than I was when I was their age, and I can still hang with these guys. I go in there, I still do my stuff. I don't feel like I'm any slower than they are or anything like that. I just feel like I've got the experience advantage, and it's a nice test for me, to wrestle guys that are like half my age, and it gives me faith in the British wrestling scene. Seeing all these young guys come through, I'm just like, yeah, British wrestling's in good hands, and yeah, they're wrestling a style that I love, and it's good because it's like the tradition of British wrestling will be passed on through these guys.
Oh, absolutely, no question about that. And I want to ask you actually a slight detour on that, but still in the same vein. Now, give me an answer that in any way you can. I watch a lot of British wrestling that as much as I can. I certainly watch a lot of things, different companies, different places. And how do you feel right now then the state of British wrestling is going into 2024 without being too political, just in general? Because I say that without being too political. How do you feel about the way things are right now in the wrestling scene?
Just like I said to you last time, the British wrestling scene is it's kind of been overlooked for such a long time, and I feel like it still hasn't got the credit that it
I
truly
agree with that.
deserves.
I definitely agree with that.
And with all these new stars coming through, and obviously with these new schools opening, there's one in Stoke-on-Trent, which is a really good school as well. So anybody around that area, my cousin actually trains at that school.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a really good school there, run by Mark Andrews,
I know Mark
and
Andrews. Definitely know
yeah,
Mark Andrews.
and his partner, whose name is escaping me right now. I'm
Well,
so
I'm not
sorry.
going to ask you because you're Dean Allmark. I'm not correcting you. If it was
Yeah.
RPG, wink, wink, I'd probably correct him. But since you're Dean Allmark, I can't correct you.
The Godfather, like I've totally forgotten his name, and he's like I've met him like loads, and he's a good friend of mine. And God, what is his name? It's CTE. That's the downside of wrestling for 23 years. It's the brain injury. It's just like you'll have somebody's name and then it'll just go. It's just
Well,
terrible.
if it
So
makes you feel, I'll tell you what, I'll make you feel better. Obviously, it's not on that level, but at this point, I have so many people that message me. I've been doing this 5 years. They say, "Hey, I'm supposed to come on Sportswire," and sometimes I'm like, really?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah." Then I have to I check my trail on email and the trail on social media, my trail, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, they do have to come on Sportswire." So maybe not be CTE, but it's just forgetful of like my schedule. I should probably like have like a calendar or something on my phone, but I just don't at this point.
maybe it's our age again, but I think the school's called New Wave Wrestling anyway. I think
Okay.
it's in Staffordshire, and from the clips that I've seen, it looks amazing. So anybody in the Staffordshire area should definitely check that one out. And there's schools right the way through the UK now. So it's really easy, just like you were saying. The prices aren't sky
I
high
mean,
or anything like
15
that.
pounds. I mean, think about this, right? I was actually speaking with somebody 2 days ago, and they were asking me, well, Tom, how much do you think it would cost to go to a wrestling school this is here in the US? Well, realistically, I would say have between $2,000 and $4,000 on hand, US dollars. So probably UK pounds would translate to be about anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000, just give or take, right? And I would say, well, think of it like going to college, right? If you go for a semester of classes in a college or a university in the UK, that might be a couple of classes, or it might be worth that tuition cost. I would say, look at it this way. But in this case, when it comes to claw, 15 pounds only to hear Dean Allmark and to learn from Dean Allmark. In addition to that, to learn from Soner Durson, to learn from Izzy Evo. I mean, listen, and I don't want to just overstate this, but this is really one of the best deals anybody is going to give you around. I mean, 15 pounds. Like I said, Dean Allmark, I went to see Napoleon last weekend. If I would have bought a single admission ticket for that, I would have probably paid close to double that and about triple that between the cost of popcorn and soda. You are only getting a deal like this that nobody else is going to give you. This is quite a holiday gift. You think about Christmas, Hanukkah, all these other Festivus, 3 days, Kwanzaa. What a holiday gift to give to someone that might want to learn a few things in the wrestling world, maybe get into better shape, and learn from the likes of Dean Allmark, Soner Durson, and Lizzie Evo. So certainly make sure you go out and support Claw Wrestling on Twitter, and also follow Dean Allmark on all these great platforms. Dean Allmark on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, also Instagram as well. Dean_Allmark_wrestling_systems, and YouTube, where you can watch a long, long list of matches, a resume that is as good as anybody's or as better as anybody that's going to be in their respective Hall of Fames. He's got nearly 2,500 subscribers. I am always looking at something that Dean Allmark is doing, and we are extremely, extremely honored to have him back on Sports Wire Radio, a early holiday gift here for those that are listening and watching, including yours truly. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice of all wrestling. And if you are on Sportswire Radio, you can always follow us here on our brand new website. We have a brand new website, which you can check out anytime, anywhere. You can also listen to us anytime, anywhere, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year on sportswireradio.org. You can listen to us either via the Watch Now, or if you don't want to see my long hair, my mutton chops, you don't want to, you're sick of seeing my face, don't want to see it all together, you can watch us via the Listen Live button. And also, if you want to check us out, we have our brand new blog that is activated. You can check us out here on tumblr.com at Sportswire Radio. And you can also see where I announced Dean Allmark being in the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. I gave a quote. I also showed a clip from a recent guest. So you can check that out here. Also, check us out anytime on sportswireradio.org. We can see all of our list of shows. If you have a podcast out there, if you want to play some music, I actually take care of all that stuff, all the arrangements for free. So if you want to learn how to become a DJ, if you want to learn how to have your own show over the air, just like how Dean is teaching people how to wrestle, I give mom and pop podcasts the opportunity to have their show presented in front of a larger audience free of charge. Always about giving back to the community. Dean has been a big example of that. Okay, Dean, obviously, I want to talk about some more stuff you had in the ring recently, and I want to talk about your most recent action this past weekend for our friends over at Top Rope Wrestling, and especially Mr. Sheik El Sham. Now, I'm not going to ask you about Santa Claus and Sheik El Sham, but I'm going to ask you about your most recent match out there this past weekend because I'd like to know about it, and I think those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio wants to know about Dean's last match in the ring.
So my last match was interesting. I got to the show expecting to be in a triple threat match.
Kendrick and Snow. I was like, I asked you, I'm like, hey, were you in the ring with Kendrick and Snow? Because I was looking at it, and then you were like, no, and then you'll tell me why, and then tell us why.
It got switched. It got switched last minute, and I ended up wrestling my mentor, James Mason.
Well, oh, we know about very well. Yep.
Yeah, so me and James Mason went out there, and yeah, it was done nice and early. I was on first, which I'm always happy about, and yeah, I was able to get a couple of drinks after that match and watch the show. So I always enjoy watching wrestling. So if I can get my match done nice and early and go watch the rest of the show, that's a great thing. So yeah, wrestled James Mason, defeated James Mason, and
I'm seeing a theme here. I'm seeing a theme. Defeated.
Yeah, I'm on a bit of a roll right now. So yeah, that was a fun little show, not too far away, like about an hour down the road. So that was a lovely way to spend
a nice
Sunday.
crowd over there too. I was watching some of the clips on Instagram, and I was seeing a nice little Festivus kind of crowd there, and you got to also see a very good friend of ours that you obviously trained a little bit, named Mr. Mike Angus. Obviously, one of the best in the business, by the way, in terms of doing this. I mean, you may like my introductions, but I think we can agree that Mike is definitely the best or at the top when it comes to doing this. Each and every match we see somebody come out in the ring for.
Yeah, myself and Mike traveled together with the promoter from Progress Wrestling, Lee McAteer.
I know Mr. McAteer. Yes, I do.
Yeah, he had a day off, so he just jumped in the car. We're from the same area, so he jumped in the car. We traveled to the show. Angus kept us entertained.
And that's easy for Angus to do. I mean, Angus can entertain himself. He's like Flair talking to a broom. I mean, that's easy for Angus.
Yeah, it's nice for an hour, but when it gets to about 5 hours, you've just totally had enough, and you just want to kick him out of the car.
That's kind of like how people on Sportswire, they hear me so long, and they're like, well, okay, I've had enough. I'm sick of his voice. Get him out. Get the hook. When you do comedy, it's like it's not good. They always get the hook. At least they used to do it years ago. If you like bombed on stage.
Oh, yeah. But on the microphone in the ring, he's exceptional. I think he's probably the best MC around right now in the UK.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and he should be on every show, in my opinion. He's so passionate about professional wrestling, and it's nice to have somebody around that isn't to the ring, but they're still just as passionate as I am about professional wrestling. And yeah, Mike and Lee have become good friends of mine. We play football together. We've become drinking partners sometimes.
Well, don't tell me about the drinking stuff on the air. Keep that off the air.
Oh,
But
sorry.
no, it was a joke. I was trying to make you feel good.
Yeah.
I was trying to actually for the audience out there. But no. You can drink on the air. By the way, you're Dean Allmark. I just
I
mentioned
did
that.
last time. I've just
I
got my
know.
water because it's not the summer anymore.
Yeah, well,
So
I have a Gatorade because I usually have a soda when I'm on the air, but it's still a little early for me. So I figured let me go with the Gatorade. Otherwise, I'll basically be shot later on. But I was curious about something else that you said about Mike, which I want to touch upon. To my buddy Mr. Joshua Allen, and Joshua out there was just part of a huge pro wrestling show out in Memphis, Tennessee, not too far from where you wrestled almost 20 years ago, and Resurrection Pro Wrestling. So I want to say hello to Mr. Allen, and Mr. Allen is also working on a podcast, which I think he's going to play on my radio station. So I appreciate Mr. Allen, but Mike is a great guy. Mike. I know Mike for a while. And I always love what Mike brings to the table. His energy and enthusiasm is so great. But in a larger scale, because he's not wrestling, but still has maybe more enthusiasm than maybe even people that wrestle on a card. I mean, how does that make you feel seeing somebody like a Mike Angus who can just go out there, the mad dog himself, kind of almost in a way still have an energy that's infectious, even though he didn't wrestle one match or take one move? I really think that that's kind of interesting to ask you about that, and kind of what impression does that make on you? And for those that might be in the business, because I do have a lot of people that'll tune into this later on that are maybe, let's say, commentators, or they're learning. And even though you might not be wrestling, you still, if you're a part of something, can, I think, still take part in a lot of ways that you should show what Mike brings to the table.
of course, yeah. I see it in a lot of referees in the UK. So many referees are really
Scott Bell, by
passionate.
the way, has Scott ever refereed one of your matches? My good buddy, Mr. Scott Bell. Have you ever
I
had
want to
Scott Bell?
say maybe. I'm terrible. As well, there's becoming a pattern here, like when it comes to
Yeah.
names and
Well, there's
faces and
Laura
stuff like
Kate. All right,
that.
Laura Kate. Have you had Laura Kate?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Yes. I remember initials better than names.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you had Simon Williams?
Maybe.
Simon Williams. Simon Williams is Bolton Town, and he does GTM. He might have done some other shows. He might have did Tom McManus's promotion if you've on that. So him I know is Scott Bell. Scott, I feel like Scott you've probably seen. LK you've definitely seen because you obviously mentioned it. You definitely know her. So I know a few referees.
Yeah. Okay. Wrestled my. Referee my match against Blake Christian
Oh
in
yes.
when I wrestled him in TNT. I only remember because he tagged me in a post. So that's
Oh
usually
okay.
how I remember people too. So social media and all that. But yeah, with faces and names, I'm absolutely terrible. But yeah, it's nice to see like referees, MCs, like when you get a good team and a good atmosphere on a show, it just brings everybody, lets everybody come along, everybody's up for it, everybody brings their A game, and it's nice to see. Like with Angus, when I mentioned to him that I was doing this wrestling school gig, he seemed quite kind of interested in training to become a wrestler again. So
Oh,
there might be some breaking news here. There might be a Mike Angus
wait.
comeback.
Are you telling me? Are you wait, time out? No. Are you mean to tell me that Mr. MC himself, Mr. Mike Angus, we might actually potentially see some type of abilities to see him once again in a ring? Are you meaning to tell me here, sir, Mr. Allmark, if I could call you that, sir, Mr. Allmark?
I think that we might see it. Like he gets angry so much on a football pitch. I'm like, man, you need to
Well, he is a tall
take that
man.
aggression
Well, you know
out on
what?
somebody.
Got a face that would definitely say he could definitely have some rage built up inside there. He's definitely got the height and he's definitely got the size. So I mean, he might as well, give it a shot because I just had on a guy, Lucas Jackson, who's a part of Bolton Town Wrestling and a few other places, and he went out there and mixed it up with a number of different other guys, including Maverick Matt Williams, and he was teams alongside Joel Cobra, and Joel Cobra is basically like 100 feet long, and and he is out there trying to do it. So and he basically does what Mike does. So Mike should certainly see what Lucas Jackson tried to do in Bolton Town last month and say, you know what? I could do better than that. I could do better than Lucas Jackson. Lucas Jackson's known for these almost like Riddler-looking suits almost, these rather colorful-looking sport jackets. I mean, I think Mike can certainly do a little bit better than Mr. Lucas Jackson of Bolton Town Wrestling, who's also their general manager. So I think Mike should want to try and mix it up. I mean, he might as well.
He might as well. He's got nothing to lose, apart from maybe his hair.
Well, I mean,
And it,
almost following up on that in a way. I mean, Mike doesn't have much hair left. Maybe I could, maybe he could borrow some off mine. If he
I'd
wants.
love to cut that. Do you know like that little thing that he has, like in a ponytail? It's all
Yes, yes.
shaved on the side. I'd love to just get a pair of scissors and just snip it off.
Are you try? Don't tell me you're gonna try and play tricks when the wrestlers are sleeping. Certainly. I know you guys do stuff out, in the
Well, it's
back.
just
You know.
well, he is just starting out like as a wrestler.
Well, the
So who
famous story
knows?
was years ago. I think it was X-Pac when he was 1-2-3 Kid was starting out, and it was Mr. Perfect, and they were, I guess, whatever happened in the locker room, and I think Mr. Perfect wound up shaving, I think, the 1-2-3 Kid's side of the hair. So that one day he was on Raw, he looked a certain way. Then they showed him on TV, and they kind of made a joke about it for like weeks because I guess Mr. Perfect shaved his sides almost. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if Mike, you're listening out there or watching. I'll certainly make sure you are after this, but you might want to hold on closely to that little ponytail you've got there, because if Mr. Allmark gets his way, he's going to certainly. We remember him being called Jumping Dean Allmark for a reason. He's jumping to cut that little thing off your head.
And we can have a match, hair versus hair.
Well, he might have more to lose
straight
than
out
you.
of the gate.
He might have more to lose than you, though. At this point, you might actually have more. You have more than him, possibly.
I
If you,
don't. Yeah, maybe.
you look good,
I
by the
don't.
way.
Oh, thank you,
You
thank
look
you.
good. You look good. The
Yeah.
ladies seem to be happy with the way you look these days too.
Oh, thank you. No, I haven't noticed, honestly.
Well, my lovely friend Zena is telling me that she loves the way you look, and she's certainly really, really happy that you're back on Sportswire. Okay, but you know what? Okay, enough about Mike Angus. I want to come back to another match in a second. But speaking of people that maybe might jump in a might cover something in a ring. Apparently, our old friend, or you certainly, your former student, Mr. Luke Hardy, aka Mr. Luke Leyland, might be coming back onto Sportswire in a few weeks because he might be covering something about something going on in a ring, but not you in a wrestling ring. Apparently, something else around the world. So, I mean, hopefully, you could give some advice to Mr. Luke on coming back to Sportswire, because apparently, real soon he's coming back onto the show. I mean, what do you think about Mr. Leyland coming back?
Do you know what? I'm so happy for Luke.
Yes.
We went for a drink and he was so passionate telling me about all his plans, and I think maybe he still had some doubts about it, and I just put him straight, and just told him he should just be who he's always been, who he's always believed that I think he is, and yeah, I just think he's going to do great things. So
Luke's
I'm
the
really
man. Luke is
excited.
the man. Luke is awesome. I want to say Luke, what I always love about Luke also is he's always posting on his Instagram story like something like motivational. He's always posting something. You see people these days, and people are always posting, whether it's like their political stuff or their almost their drama. But Luke, I always check his your Instagram stories. I'm always making sure to like, sir, because you are Dean Allmark. So I mean, you could do no wrong when it comes to me, sir. But I mean, obviously, though, but no serious about Mr. Leyland. Anytime Mr. Leyland posts something on his Instagram, I'm always looking at it, but I'm also liking it as a friend. But I'm also actually walking away, and learning something from him. He's always posting something educational and something motivational, if that makes sense.
And that is Luke. He's such a positive guy, and yeah, I'm just really excited for him. I'm so happy for him. Like when I see him posting these things, I'm just like, wow, like
I know.
he's gonna go down like such a treat, and he's gonna go off like a rocket. It's gonna be amazing. So I just can't wait to see what he does. And yeah, I've got true belief in Luke and everything he does. And yeah, he's such a guy, such a guy.
Before I get to it, so you don't think he'll embarrass himself too much when he comes back on here, then, right?
No, absolutely. Well, maybe just keep him away from the beer, and he's absolutely
No.
fine.
Well, honestly, when he was on here the first time, it was almost a year ago now. It was like a really good interview. It's funny. He was like, "Well, I just want to tell you that was really good." And I was like, I actually watched it back a couple of days ago when he messaged me, and I was like, "Wow, you know what? Actually, it really was a good interview." I was like listening to the flow of it, because sometimes, like you, I'm sure you watch some of your stuff. You're like, "Well." I don't remember that, or I want to forget about that. And I watched our interview back, and I was like, wow, that was actually like a pretty good interview, because sometimes you don't want to like think about these things or watch them. And I actually watched his, and I'm like, you know what, Luke, I really can't wait to have him on. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm certainly excited about the future of what he's going to do. He's finally, I mean, he's been working on this project. I spoke to you about this the first time on the air, but he's been working on this project for a really, really long time. But I think now he's coming close to where he's going to finally get it right here. But, obviously I'm teasing about who I'm going to ask you about toward the end, because I want to certainly save maybe not the best for last, but the biggest for last, who I want to ask you on in my most recent Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame guest a few days back. But I want to talk to you also about November the 18th, where you also wrestled in Newcastle for Undisputed Wrestling. And you were a part of really almost like another dream match. You wrestled Isaac North. I know Isaac North very well. You had Rob Drake. Who doesn't know Rob Drake? Brady Phillips, another guy. Who doesn't know him? And a guy, ironically, who kind of ties into that person I'm going to ask you about in a little while, a guy I interviewed, and I think I had him on twice, and at least once in a standalone, a guy, Scotty Rock, a really up-and-coming wrestler. And I was really curious about these opponents that you had. Obviously, some of them you're going to know really, really well. But Scotty Rock is a guy that, in a way, I think he might be the wrestler you're talking about, the up-and-coming British wrestler who I really think can go places. He's also been a number of different places across the scene. When I feel like I had Scotty, it was almost like, speaking about that rocket analogy, I felt like I was going to, if I didn't get him 2.5 years ago, I don't think I'd ever get him. So I'm curious about the match, but also especially Scotty Rock. What was he like to be in the ring with?
So it was actually a gauntlet match, and Scotty was. So let me see if my memory serves me right. I think Scotty was in there. He was out first, and he wrestled a guy who won earlier in the night to win a spot in the match.
Mm-hmm.
Zio Knox, his name was, and unfortunately he lost to Zio uh, in the first part of the gauntlet. I came out. I got revenge for him. I like Scotty. He's a good kid. He's got a really good look, and I agree with everything that you said about him. He's got such a bright future. Looks a bit like Colin Farrell, I think.
Yeah, he's
Colin
got this.
Farrell
Yeah. With longer hair. Well, short,
with
maybe
longer
short.
hair. Yeah, with
Longer
longer
hair,
hair.
and he's got this really like unique look about him. He's got the tattoos. He's also, I don't know if you know this about him, he has a band. He's like a death metal singer, and he's
Hmm.
very into like, like alternate kind of living. And he's a really, really unique guy. He's got a really, really unique mindset about him. I don't know how much you know about him in that, because I interviewed him and I got a chance to know him quite a bit, and I got a chance to listen to his music and play his music. And I really feel like Scotty's one of these really, really unique guys that kind of brings something different to the table here in British professional wrestling.
Yeah, we haven't spent much time together, but he seems like he's got really good energy about him.
Yes, yes.
He seems like a really good kid. A couple of years ago, I did a seminar for a wrestling school called BWR in
Oh, I know
Lincolnshire.
BW. Yeah, British Wrestling Revolution.
Yeah,
Absolutely BWR. Yeah,
yeah, and
if I'm not mistaken.
I'm pretty sure he was at the seminar, so
Yes,
that would have
and
been
he
the
might
first
have
time I met
been.
him.
You know what? And it's funny you said that. He might have been. It was either him or Two Bit that was their cruiserweight champion, if I'm not mistaken. He held the title for that company, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah. So that was the first time I met him, and then I met him at TNT a couple of times, and he's got really good, cool energy about him. Yeah, he's a cool kid, and yeah, everything that you said about him in the ring, I can see. Unfortunately, he lost in the first little bit of that gauntlet match. I came out, I beat Zio, and then I got beat by Brady Phillips, and I was eliminated from the gauntlet. And then Brady beat Isaac North when it came down to those two.
And Isaac
And
North's
and the,
another guy I know very well. I haven't had him on the show, but he also is kind of doing the rounds of some of the companies that we cover on Sportswire. So again, this always feels like this is your life, the circle of life. There you go. Here you go.
there you go. So, and Brady Phillips actually became the first ever wrestling in Newcastle champion, which that match was for. So, yeah, it was a fun little match. Obviously, gauntlet matches. I haven't really been in. I think I've been in one gauntlet match before in my entire career. So, a bit of a new match. Bit weird, like beating one guy and having another guy come out fresh.
Yeah,
Especially a guy
I
like.
just had a wrestler on that did it. Speaking of that, in Resurrection Pro Wrestling, we had a guy on, the trendsetter Alan Michaels, and he came out, I think, first, and he wound up beating a couple of guys, and then he wound up getting beat. And I was asking him, what was that like? And he was like, well, you kind of almost don't have a chance to breathe almost. You kind of like have to just almost like keep yourself at like 10, like you go like, or Spinal Tap would say you're going what, 110, I think it was on the amp, or no, the amp goes to 10 and you want it to go to 11. That's almost like in a way with being in the gauntlet match. You have to always stay at 11, and it's kind of hard to stay at 11 all the time, to quote Spinal Tap there.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, Brady is a really good young. Well, he's not
Yep.
really young. He's been wrestling 20
No,
years now. But
yeah, Brady's
to
been
me, he's
around a while. I was gonna say
yeah, he
Brady.
has. But he always comes across as like a much younger guy for me. So yeah, he came along, beat me with a bit of British wrestling pins back and forth, and then he caught me with a good pin. So yeah, he got me fair and square, which I'm not salty about at all.
Okay.
And then he went on to become the first win champion.
So you were happy though with it, and let me ask you a follow up. Leave aside the outcome. Would you want to be in more gauntlet matches? It's something that, it's interesting you said that, because as we're talking with the legendary Dean Allmark, and of course, Dean Allmark is the newest member of the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. You can check him out on Instagram at Dean Allmark. Also, Dean_Allmark_wrestling_systems. Also, Twitter and Facebook at Dean Allmark, and YouTube at Dino with a bunch of E's, A's, N's, and O's. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, the host of the Sports Report, your voice of all wrestling, and the owner of Sportswire Radio. It's interesting, Dean, that you've done so much in your career, figuratively and literally, but in thousands of matches, you're telling me this was only the second time you had wrestled in a gauntlet match. So would you like to wrestle in more gauntlet matches? I mean, I'm curious on that.
Yeah, I think so. Especially like it's a good feeling like when you're the fresh guy and there's been a guy who's already been out there and he's just wrestled. That's a good feeling, especially at my age. Maybe I just need like a bit of a handicap, but it's not so good when you're not fresh and there's a fresh guy coming in. It's not a good feeling at all. But yeah, it's a fun little match. It's a match that I used to enjoy watching when I was a kid, and I can't remember which video game it was. There was a video game where it was kind of like a gauntlet match, and I was just like, "Wow, this is the best thing ever!" Like you didn't know who was coming out next, and yeah, it's definitely like a fast-paced, fun match for the fans. I think like it's like a wrestling show without any
You
interruptions,
know what
which
it
is
almost,
quite unique.
yeah, it's almost, it's not quite a Royal Rumble because obviously 30 people, and it almost reminds me of like when you see not a tornado match, but maybe sometimes when you see like these, like the Elimination Chamber, where somebody's kind of waiting there, and then
Mm,
obviously the glass kind of lifts, and then they come in. I mean, it's certainly not the same thing, but it's kind of got that some sort of way and feel to it that makes it kind of interesting. And I think the fans kind of get into it because it's almost like penalty kicks in football, or people kind of wonder, like, hey, who's coming out next? It's got
yeah,
that kind of like, you're almost as a fan, you've got that like extra oomph to you, that extra like juice to it. So yeah, I would say, what, as a fan, now I'm thinking about it, like I do kind of like to see those matches. I mean, obviously it's predetermined who's going to come in terms of who's in the match, but there is kind of sides. It's a two-way street, which sometimes in a wrestling match, if you're watching it live or on TV, and if you're wrestling a part of it, you don't always get that two-way street. So maybe it's an interesting two-way street there.
yeah, definitely. And from a wrestler's perspective and a fan's perspective, I feel like a gauntlet match is like one of the most unutilized matches in wrestling, and it's definitely one that should be around more, I feel.
Interesting. I had never thought about it that way. All the people I've interviewed that have wrestled, I hadn't thought of it that way. It's an interesting analogy there. So we'll see. Maybe we'll see you in more of those. And I had to ask because there was something on Twitter shared out there, because I see the progress sweater you have on. I mean, do you think
Ooh, 2 seconds.
possibly that? Yeah, I'm gonna take my I'm gonna take
There
my
we go.
plugs off first. I'm actually, let me do that
Plug in the
first.
merch.
I was gonna say,
There you go,
because
Lee
obviously
McAteer.
we've seen you there. I mean, do you think that there would be? No, don't tell us anything. Do you think there'd be a possibility one day we could see you again in that company called Progress, which has been on? Oh, by the way, the WWE Network. Do you think maybe one day we could see you there again? Do you think it's a possibility, a hope, a prayer?
Definitely, yeah. Like, and I was just saying this to Lee in the car, like on the way to Burnley the other day with Angus. I said every single match that I had in progress, like, was an amazing match. I got put in there with some like amazing opponents, and I'm really proud of my body of work in progress. I feel like the run of matches that they gave me was really challenging for me at that stage of my career, and yeah, just wrestling the Greshams, the Cara Noirs, the Chris Ridgeways, the Takeshtas, the Hiatas, you know what I mean? Like the list goes on, and I just feel like, man, like those were challenges. And when I look back at the matches now, like I feel like really proud. Yeah, so when I'm ready to go again, get this little niggle out the way, I'll be definitely looking to have some more classic matches for that promotion because, as I said, when it comes to a body of work, there's no other promotion that I'm more proud of. To show people like this is this match from Progress, or if anybody asks, like, and if you go to like there's a website, I don't know if you know it, you probably
Cage
do. It's
match?
called, yeah, Cage Match. Like,
Like, who doesn't
obviously,
know
of
Cage
course you do,
match?
yeah. So,
I would just say,
like,
Dean Allmark, I know you're a living legend, and I know you've done the podcast circuit, but you do realize that I actually have interviewed like other wrestlers, and what do I always do? Research. So yes, I mean
oh,
I
that's
know
where you do
you.
your research.
Not from you,
Okay.
not off you, but in general. Like, so I have sometimes I'll have these guys on that are independent wrestlers in America,
Mm,
right? So I'm not going to be able now. The British wrestling scene's a little different because I don't want to say who, but there'll always be somebody, little birdie, if I could say it that way, will give me
mm,
somebody's match, right? So I'll be able to cover somebody and talk about them, right? But if I get
mm,
like a message, sometimes I'll get messages from like different independent wrestlers, and they'll say, "Well, can I come on your show?" And I'll say, "Okay, sure," you know. And then they'll give me information and they'll tell me this is one what's called cage match. There's another one. I forget the other one. It's cage match, and then there's another one that also has wrestlers matches on there. There's two different ones on there. It's cage match and something else. So the point is, yes, I know cage match. I mean, but one
yeah.
of them's not as reputable as the other, if I'm not mistaken. There's one that
Oh,
they
okay.
yeah, there's one that like they'll have what they call incomplete matches, whereas I think cage match is the one that has everything actually like up to date. So like if you appeared in Progress or if you
Yeah.
appeared, let's say in TNT as an example, right? It'll have that there. But if you wrestled, let's say in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, like RPD, get to him soon, or let's say you wrestled in the LWF, it might not be on there because let's say somebody who was reporting for that show may not have listed or given that information to somebody on that website, if that makes sense.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. I get you. Yeah, so I think Cage Match is the good one. I don't know what the other one is, but on Cage Match they give you like recommended matches to watch, and all my matches that are recommended are like progress matches on there. So I think that speaks for itself, and yeah, again, I'm really proud of those matches. And I would love to get back to progress. Like progress is doing such a good job, and yeah, I just think they're going from strength to strength. They got Angus there, they got Lee McAteer, so it could be a journey. Like, yeah, a couple of drinks on the way. Who knows? Drinks
Interesting.
of water,
Well, it's
of
good you're
course.
drinking. It's good that you're drinking water here. There's no question that you should be drinking water because I don't drink enough of it. So obviously, I'm glad that somebody is certainly doing it. I mean, yeah, I think the other site was Pro Fight, as my crack staff gives it to me, profightdb.com. That's one of kind of the other ones, and cagematch.net is the one that you refer to here. And let me get to some other comments here because I have a few people that want to say hello. So let me do that here. I want to say hello to my buddy Skulls from California, which is it's morning his time. It's 10 o'clock in the morning his time. He says good morning. He also says he loves TNA, Monsters Ball, cage matches, great stuff with that.
Mm,
So maybe we'll see you in progress We'll certainly have to keep our fingers crossed. Maybe when you come back, if you want to come back and you feel that I've embarrassed myself enough that you want to get more laughs the third time you come on the show in a few months, we can see maybe by then that you're in progress or somewhere else, and we can talk about that. Because I kind of have a feeling that you kind of like maybe seeing myself and kind of the, how I make you laugh and maybe laughing at me, and you have a good time with it. Maybe you want to come back a third time. I was only kidding. It was a joke. I was trying to
Of
make
course,
everybody laugh.
we
But
should definitely make it a regular thing.
of course, you're Dean Allmark. I mean, you're Dean Allmark. If you want to say, look, jump, I'll say how far, or Mr. Allmark, how high. I mean, that's the old analogy. But obviously, as we're coming toward the end of the show or the last part of it, I do have to bring up this guy that I'm sure you've heard of by now. He said a few things about you, and I made sure you specifically got a chance to hear the entire thing. And his name is the natural born fighter, RP Davis, or he likes to refer to himself as RPD. And obviously, he's going to be wrestling coming up later in 2024, well, at the end of the month in January, for a company called TNT against a guy now, Chase Akala. He was Chase Martini, now he's Chase Akala. And I certainly asked him, because I asked you the first time you came on, about this gentleman. Obviously, this gentleman now is referring to himself as the Grand Slam UK champion. He's decided now that he's got 4 belts, 3 of them in a trophy, that he's the Grand Slam UK champion. He's this natural born fighter. He's basically impressed and wowed over everybody. Sam Gradwell recently, and KC Payne. I mean, probably guys you've definitely heard of. No question. You definitely heard of some of these names. Lance Rivera. By the way, Lance Rivera, another guy, would love to see you wrestle. The Playboy Prince, Lance Rivera. He was the Wrestle Island champion last year. He's another guy that, goes about in a way you probably wouldn't agree about, that gentlemanly respect way, kind of throwback to the old world of sport. Lance Rivera, definitely not an old world of sport guy, but that's here nor there. RPD succeeded in defeating him to keep his Odyssey Pro Wrestling Championship in his last match of the year. And I was wondering if you've got a chance to digest some of those thoughts. And I was also thinking about, since TNT Wrestling, TNT Ignition, TNT Extreme Wrestling is now actually following yours truly on Facebook, and they got a wind of what Mr. Davis had to say about you, Mr. Allmark. What was your reactions toward that? And maybe down the road sometime in 2024, if you'd like to maybe take up Mr. Davis's offer of wrestling you as a potential dream match of his.
You know what? Like, you tagged me in the post, and I was expecting some shit talk, but yeah, he was really respectful.
No,
he was
he's
really
a,
nice.
He's a, no,
He was really good. He was really
he's a
good.
good
So,
man. I
do
gotta
you know
tell
what?
you, he's a good man.
I got nothing bad to say at
No, he's
all.
a good man.
And
Legitimately,
yeah,
RPD, I've known him for 3 years. He was the first, by the way, this is a little cool antidote. He was the first British wrestler I ever interviewed. And that's only because a guy that kind of got my foothold into the UK was a boxing promoter. And he interviewed Mr. Davis because Mr. Davis, as we know, was a boxing champion. And he said to Mr. Davis, he's like, I want you to do something. And Mr. Davis said, okay, what would you like? He says, I want you to speak to this guy here. This guy, he's an American. He's got an interesting voice. Maybe you could poke fun at it because he's got this interesting New York accent, but he knows his stuff on wrestling. I've heard him speak about wrestling. I've spoken to him on WhatsApp, and I think you should want to talk to this guy. So I speak to Mr. Davis, and after Mr. Davis did the interview, Mr. Davis says, I want to tell you something. I said, yes, sir. You're this, boxer guy. He's like, I do these podcasts all the time, and these guys, they don't really watch me. They know nothing about me. He says, I'm going to tell some of my friends about you, and I want you to, do what I say, and I'm going to make sure you always have a career. I said, okay, well, kind of what going along to what you said about Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis, outside the ring, is a gentleman, but I'm just warning you, sir, inside the ring, he's definitely not a gentleman. That's all.
that's fine. That's what I like. I like that. I like it.
You do? You
We're
like
getting
that,
in there and getting
yeah.
stuck in. Yeah, I love
do?
it. I love it. Yeah, I love it. So, like, he was really nice, really respectful. I loved your interview with him. He seems like a really, really
He
nice
likes
guy.
me. He's been on like 10 times over 3 years. We don't do it like we used to during COVID. We do it like every month. He messaged me on WhatsApp. You got a minute? I'm like, yeah, it's COVID. Nobody's going anywhere. He's like, can we do like a 2-minute thing? A 5-minute soundbite. I'm like, okay, sure. But now when I get him, because he's like the Grand Slam UK champion, it's basically like every few months. It's like, hey, I'm like, Mr. Davis, are you available? Yes, sir. So he's like, he always makes time, though, which I really appreciate from Mr. Davis.
Yeah, he seems like a really nice guy. And just like I said last time, yeah, I'd love to test myself against him. And now I know that he's got four championships as well. That's
Now you've
even more
held,
interesting.
now
I
I
would,
know that you've held a lot of championships. I think the count's what, over a dozen, right? Different singles and tag titles. But he's got four, and I would think with your resume, now your resume is certainly the body of work has a far greater ratio of success than his. I would have to think, though, as a competitor, as a man that has won many championships, as a man that has defeated Hall of Famers like Jushin Thunder Liger, like somebody like Bryan Danielson, who's certainly been a main eventer in the biggest stage of them all, and other guys you've been in the ring with, like Jake the Snake Roberts, another Hall of Famer, Doug Williams, you certainly another legend, living British legend here. I mean, I can go on and on and on. I would think, though, that would certainly, seeing what he has, you would want to have that for yourself, because I think you're certainly worthy of being the real Grand Slam UK champion.
yeah, and yeah, it's just when everything's put on the line and there's so much pressure, that's where I thrive. So yeah, it just makes things more interesting.
I mean,
And
listen, you look at who you've wrestled. I mean, the biggest person he wrestled is Anthony Ogogo. You've done that like tenfold in your sleep. I mean, that's his biggest wrestling opponent, Anthony Ogogo. You've wrestled, again, I could list off further names. Gangrel, you beat him. You were in a tag match, a six-man tag with Carlito, Chris Masters. Paul Burchill, you were in the ring with him. I mean, I can go up and down the list of people. Doug Williams, did I mention him again? I mean, you've been in there with pretty much every name. Chris Ridgway, oh, forgot about him. I got to mention Chris Ridgway, you and him. I mean, you can go on of names that people know. Oh, and by the way, you wrestled for this little company called Ring of Honor, and you wrestled for their world championship here in Progress against this guy, Jonathan Gresham. So, I mean, he may have wrestled Mr. Ogogo, but you wrestled guys like tenfold bigger than that.
yeah, and like you said, when I was wrestling Doug, we had like a feud going for the TNA X Division Championship when he was holding that.
And then you
He was
had the
he was
match with Doug for the Ring of Honor showcase. That was the most recent.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, the ring at Wrestle Carnival. So,
Yep.
yeah, just I've wrestled these guys like for many, many years, and I know he said like he's a different kind of wrestler, and I've never seen anything like that before. But I promise you, I've seen
No,
every trick
and
in the
Doug,
book. Like I
you bring up
promise you.
Doug. You bring up Doug. Doug is like, in a lot of ways, I mean, he wasn't a boxer, but I'm sure if Doug put on boxing gloves, he could probably hit almost as hard as RPD, no?
Doug was a judo player originally. Before he
Oh,
became a professional wrestler, he was judo. So I'm big on like martial arts styles. Obviously, I was my
yep.
dad was a black belt in kung fu growing up, so I was always in the dojo and I was always attracted to martial arts. So yeah, just it's good, and these little things I keep to myself. So I like to bring these things out in matches sometimes, and yeah, I just feel like we'd have a really, really good contest. And if it was for TNT just across the water, I'm looking over to Liverpool out my window now. And if it's right there, then even better. It's pretty much my hometown. So yeah, I can see that working out
I mean,
really
I would
well.
like to see it in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, my very good friends in Morecambe, but I think naturally TNT, with your history there, his history there, and being now a champion for over 1 year, 1 calendar year, one whole year, he has been the TNT champion, and he's had an impressive list of opponents. No question about it. But, I was like saying to myself, Dean Allmark. His name is Dean Allmark. This is a man that, again, if you say his name to every wrestler that I speak of, they go, "Oh, okay, yeah, Dean Allmark." So RPD, certainly, he may have never seen, or you may have, he, in his words, you may have never seen anything about him. But conversely, I think it's the other way around. He's never seen anything like you, because your resume is as good as anybody's he'll ever step foot in the ring with. And in fact, I'll even go on the record as the host of the Sports Report, the owner of Sportswire Radio, and your voice of all wrestling, the Reverend Tom Bryce. I'll guarantee you that RPD will never, ever, in the words of Chris Jericho, ever face an opponent with a resume like yours. So it might very well be the other way around if this match would happen, which I'm very confident that one day it will happen, whether it's tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I'm confident it'll happen. That's all.
That's why they call you the Reverend, because you're preaching right now. You're preaching.
Well, because listen, think about what's best for business, right? Think about RPD, right? RPD is one of the few guys that, as I continue to say, sells tickets. And he even kind of asked me, he goes, off the air, he's like, who told you that? And I said, well, I can't give up my sources. But he's one of the few talents that basically he sells out a show or sells tickets, a lot of them on his own. You're Dean Allmark. You're the man that's responsible for countless talent being in this business. You're the man that has wrestled pretty much everybody, every Yankee, quote unquote, Yankee American that came and went through All Star or went through this country. They wanted to wrestle you. So if you think about a match of this magnitude, this really would be really an attraction match, a once in a lifetime match. And if I'm a promoter out there, you only have so much more time left to do it where these guys are at the peak of their conditions, the peak. And on top of it, RPD is the Grand Slam UK champion. If RPD, right, and we love RPD, he's a Hall of Famer, but if he says he's the true Grand Slam UK champion, he should want to go out there and compete against Dean Allmark. And on top of that, it would actually be a Hall of Fame versus Hall of Fame match because they're both Sportswire Radio Hall of Famers. So at the end of the day, we could see who's the best Hall of Famer, who's the greatest one, who's the one that came out on top. So I think with all those combinations, give the people what they want, whatever that may be. I don't know, but I know that we're going to see Dean Allmark and the natural born fighter RP Davis. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, sir.
Sounds good to me. Sounds like it was meant to be.
I think it is. I think it is because, again, in a lot of ways, he was the first British wrestler I ever interviewed. You are the most important wrestler, maybe the most important guest in my 5 years, whether that's news anchors I've interviewed, politicians, whether it's athletes from around the world. You are arguably, figuratively, literally, the most important wrestler, the most important guest that I have ever interviewed. And you put them together. That's why this should happen. The stars have aligned. As I have the stars in the back of me with my new lights, because I'm trying to impress you. I have new lights now. I've got a new
I'm very
jacket.
impressed.
Yeah, I've got a new jacket for you. I've got the banner links there. So I'm trying to really impress you because I want to show you that, yes, I might be a joke. Yes, you might want to laugh at my New York accent, but you might want to continue to come back and have such a good time. So obviously, those are some of the things I wanted to impress upon you. And I'm sure that Mr. Davis and you would be an excellent match here. But, as we're coming up toward the end of the show, as we're speaking with the legendary Dean Allmark, and if you are tuning in here for the first time on Sportsfire Radio, I want to thank you for tuning in. If you are out there and you're watching this here, you also want to make sure you follow Dean Allmark again on Instagram. Dean Allmark, Dean_Allmark_wrestling_systems, Twitter and Facebook at Dean Allmark, and YouTube, Dean with the O, 2 E's, 2 A's, 2 N's with 4 O's. Kind of think about it, 2 + 2 = 4, and then gives you the 4 O's. Think of it that way. So Dean Allmark is here with us, a true treat here on Sportswire Radio. And, Dean, I was kind of wondering then, so what are you doing for the holidays? I mean, you have any holiday plans? Kind of want to ask you a fun question to kind of take you off your toes there and take you off the toes about beating up RPD. So, what are you doing for the holidays?
So the holidays are coming up. I've got a girl in my life. I'm sure that's heartbreaking to the millions of ladies watching this program.
This woman Zena, who I might like, but she was certainly, her heart is broken because she's a big fan of yours, and she's definitely heartbroken to hear that you have a girl. But she'll have to settle. She'll have to settle for yours truly.
Sorry about that.
She'll have to settle for this. That's all.
She's a lucky girl. She's a lucky girl.
Well,
so
hopefully one day she'll slap the taste out of me if she said that. But certainly,
yeah.
trying to work my way in.
I'm gonna take some time off. Apart from coaching, I've got no shows for the rest of the year. The one on Sunday was my final show of the year.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies, it's the last. I think so. Bolton Town is doing theirs. I think it's this Saturday, and then I think the LWF just did a show, and then they're doing one more. I think it's like next weekend's kind of the last rung of shows in the scene. I think next weekend is the last weekend of shows, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so that's done. So I've got some coaching left to do. Obviously, I'm going to spend some time with my girl, Antonia. Hello, if you're watching. And got to get that in, or I'll be in trouble. So we got like a pantomime to go to. She loves that, like going to the theatre and stuff like that. So we're going to watch a pantomime at Theatre Clwyd. And Yeah, just have a nice Christmas meal, spend time with my parents, spend time with my kids, and just relax. Just December's usually a time of the year where I take December off from wrestling, just let my body heal, and then come back strong in January. So um, I'm focused on coaching. That's going to be the only difference to
That
my
call,
regular
see
December.
you Wednesdays. Yep,
At
6:30.
Claw, yeah. So apart from that, though, it's just fun times and relaxing for the holidays. So yeah, looking forward to just resting up.
Okay, so I have to ask you. Well, actually, one piece of advice to not take your girlfriend to. As I said, I saw Napoleon. I would say don't see Napoleon.
Oh, we went to see Oppenheimer, and she was bored shitless. Like
I
literally,
gotta be
like she
honest.
was.
Okay, Oppenheimer, real quick. It's funny. Now, Mike Angus, by the way, just want to let you know, me and Mike Angus had a brief conversation on Threads. He liked Oppenheimer, loved it, by the way. Oppenheimer. All right, since it's been out, my one gripe with Oppenheimer, it would have been a good movie, but the one thing they hyped the movie up on was the bomb, and the bomb was like it wasn't even a bomb. It was like a drop in the bucket, literally. It was like
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
they hid under the tents, and it was like that's it. And then afterwards, all they did was drop it off to Hiroshima. It was like that's it. This is what you
Yeah.
hyped this movie up. This is why I spent my whole day to go watch Oppenheimer for. I was expecting like this grandiose bomb scene. It was gonna be felt around the world. I was gonna jump out of my seat, and it was like it was a thumper.
Yeah, so we watched that one. Like she doesn't like long films, so I took her to see that one. I took her to see Batman, which was like 3 hours, and she didn't like Batman either. So
Well, you wouldn't have liked
um,
Napoleon because Napoleon was 2 hours and 45 minutes, give or take. 3 hours
oh,
of trailers.
I
You
might
wouldn't
take
have
her
liked.
to see it just to wind her
But
up.
I think you would. Well, Oppenheimer at least more. Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, Robert Downey Jr. was incredible. He saved the
He was
movie.
so good. Yeah.
He saved the movie. I don't know if you get. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix plays Napoleon. I mean,
Mm.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I would say if you want to say it, see it, don't do it because you want to torture your girlfriend. But if you want to see the movie, I guess see it. But I was disappointed. That was my only piece of advice was to, not see Napoleon. I really want to see Godzilla, by the way, because I'm a big movie buff, by the way. I want to see
Okay.
Godzilla. So that's kind of the one that's next on my bucket list. And there's Silent Hill is on the list. That's the new it looks like a John Wick one, but Napoleon, like I said, I saw Napoleon because my friends
Mm.
like you got it because I used to do a movie podcast years ago, and my friend was like my co-host, like you got to see Napoleon, you got to see Napoleon. I'm like, all right, and I saw Napoleon. It was like it was a dud. It was a total dud.
Oh no. I might
Napoleon was
take her to see Hunger Games has just come out over here.
Yeah,
So
it's funny. I thought about Hunger Games, but I thought about that one. I probably should have saw Hunger Games, but I was like, all right, Napoleon. It's Joaquin Phoenix. I loved him as Joker. I'm like, I gotta see it. So yeah, that was just my friendly advice. But I do see that you went bowling recently. That was a fun one. At least you went bowling.
yeah, I took my daughter bowling.
That was fun.
So my kids were actually in New York this week. So just
You know,
before she went,
and you didn't come to New York. You didn't want to say hello. You didn't want to poke fun at me
I've
in
just
real
put
life.
I literally just put two and two together. I should have sent them round. You would have got rid of them after like 10 minutes. They would have just like torn your like house down. So yeah,
Well, you're doing
they
Allmark. I would have been like, okay, do it, tear it down. They're all still
yeah.
making
So
Allmark.
so just before they went to New York, my daughter stayed over at mine, and we went bowling, and we watched a movie. I can't remember what we watched. Played some video games, and yeah, it was
You're
a
big into Fortnite now. You're big into speaking of the hobbies, big into Fortnite.
yeah. Fortnite's just had like a new update. It's like a new chapter update. Like Fortnite for me was big for lockdown because there was a bunch of wrestlers that
Yes, and I think we
that were in a
spoke about
squad.
that. I used to interview a lot of here American baseball players, who are professional baseball players, and I would ask them, I would say, well, what do you do in your downtime? And kind of throw them off as a fun question. They would go,
Mm.
Fortnite, because Fortnite, you could just sit there and play it for like hours.
Yeah, and speak to your friends on your headset, and it was a good
Exactly.
way because obviously for me, I was used to being around wrestlers like every single day. So when that got taken away, I was just like, wow, I'm not around wrestlers. So for me, like Fortnite, listening to my wrestler friends on my headset, my squad was like Robbie X was in my Fortnite squad, Jack Stars, Yeah, I had like a solid squad, like really good wrestlers in my squad, and yeah, we played and it was fun. I think Lizzie Evo popped on a couple of times.
Okay,
Hannah Taylor, she jumped on a bit.
I
So
know Hannah.
yeah, we had a solid team, solid squad, and yeah, it was really fun times. And that pretty much made my lockdown was like speaking to my friends every day, like especially like me and Robbie X because we hadn't really spent that much time together on
I know we
shows.
spoke a lot about him. Obviously, the first time you came on, sure.
Yeah, so that was a good like bonding experience for us. So yeah, Fortnite's just had a new update and it's pretty cool, you know, pretty sick.
Yeah, I used to be big into playing online with Halo. My friends and I, we
Mm.
used to play Halo all the time, and then for a little bit, I would play Left 4 Dead on Xbox Live all the time. I mean, I still have my account, but I very rarely don't play because I don't have the time. But I used to play a lot. I used to play all the time. I would play, like I said, Halo Live. I would play Left 4 Dead. I think I even played Gears of War. Then it was after that, it was like, okay, yeah, I just didn't have the time anymore. But I used to love that. So I could certainly see why you did. So I thought, you know what? I would ask you some fun questions first. You know, I could ask you about this and that, but I thought, you know what? As the holidays are coming into the spirit, I thought I would certainly ask you something kind of fun. And then I guess my last fun question before I get to closing thoughts: what's the one holiday gift you want this year?
Holiday gift. Do you know what? I'm like old school, so I'm more like a giver than a receiver. So
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm grateful for any gift that I get. Any
You know,
gift that I
I have
get.
to say I'm kind of like you at this point because usually at this point I'm usually the one that has the funds to give people. Wink, wink. Maybe I could be. I think I did a show last night and the person was like, "Well, you know, you could actually buy a promotion." I'm like, "Are you trying to insinuate that I could virtually have the resources to buy one?" I was kind of like, if there is one open available, I might be interested. A different conversation for a different time. But at this point, like if I get like socks, I'm happy about it. I don't really
Yeah.
need anything. You know what I'm saying? Because I could buy a whole store if I wanted to. Let's be honest.
Yeah, so I'm more of a giver than a receiver,
Okay,
and it's all about my kids. Christmas is all about my kids,
sure.
all about my girlfriend. So my parents, I'll make sure they're sorted, and wherever I get, sorry, I'm grateful for. So a pair of socks would be nice, actually.
Yeah, I always use them because I'm outside. I feel that's just kind of easy gift. It's cheap. If people it's really not a big deal. I mean, I kind of feel like at this point, if you want to get me something obligatorily, that's kind of what I usually ask for. But obviously, I have no doubt that your holiday gifts are certainly going to be what you want. And I know our real holiday gift on Sportswire was having you come on the show so we could have you talk and certainly induct you into the Hall of Fame. So that was all I wanted for Christmas, really, was to have you come on the show and certainly talk about RP Davis. But obviously, as we're coming into closing thoughts, and is there anything else you want to say to anybody out there watching and listening to this? Anything, whether it's wrestlers or anybody in general, anything you want to say as as we kind of get ready to close the show here tonight?
I feel like Christmas time is like a time of giving, and I know there's a lot of people out there that don't get a lot for Christmas, and a lot of people who are lonely at Christmas, and you know, for me, who was like kind of like a lonely kid growing up, like wrestling was always there for me. So, for any of those, like anybody spending time alone or anything like that, like, you know, check out some old wrestling. You know, like for me, like if you're feeling lonely and you're like a little bit older, go back and watch those like wrestling tapes from when you were a kid and stuff, and just watch
WWE
them.
Network, obviously, if you're in the
Those,
UK, you still have it.
yeah, get those bad boys out, relive some memories. But like, be giving this year. You know, if you're getting loads and you're in a good position, make sure that you give to those who are lonely and not as fortunate as you are. And for anybody looking for anything to do, like something new to do in the new year, maybe like wrestling could be the thing for you. You know, I never thought I was gonna ever be a wrestler. I went along when I was 15 on the off chance because my friend was like destined to become
Well, also,
a
just there was an article recently about you. I mean, that you were working in your parents' market, and then it was almost kind of like you didn't really want to do it, and you drifted off and went into wrestling. So I mean, you never know out there. You never know
Yeah,
where
I
things
was
could
there
take you.
freezing my nuts off on my dad's market stall. You know what I mean? And on the coldest day of the year, which was like -20 or something like that, we didn't sell a single thing all day. And then I wrestled that weekend, you know, and after that weekend, I was off to the races and wrestling 7 times a week. So times might be tough for some people right now. Obviously, I don't want to put like a downer on this, but like the price of everything is like through
Oh
the
my
roof.
God!
So
Listen, I mean,
if
I
you've
look.
got something, make sure that you give. You know,
Oh, the prices of food, it's just
it's crazy.
it's astronomical. I mean, I was even thinking about it. I went yesterday. I was in Manhattan in New York City, and I bought two slices of pizza and a soda, and I spent $11. And I'm like, I'm not that old. I remember if I had $5, which would be 4 pound, like 4 pounds UK, whatever it might be, the translation, I'd be able to buy myself two slices of pizza and a soda, a fountain soda, or a bottle of soda. And now I need double that and some. So it just tells you just the price of food is
It's
just like
crazy.
astronomical. I mean, certainly my savings account is doing great on the interest, but I mean everything else is not keeping up with it. I mean, I'm finally making some money on all that certainly figures I have in my bank account finally. But I mean, it's really tough times. But I tell you what, it's not tough times tonight because we got a chance to speak with a living legend himself, everybody's inspiration. He is a coach, he is a mentor, he is a teacher, and he has most importantly been one of the true leaders in British professional wrestling over the past 20 years. He has done it all in his career, whether it's wrestling the likes of Jonathan Gresham recently for the Ring of Honor world title, whether it's being in the ring and defeating the likes of Bryan Danielson, WWE Hall of Famer, Jushin Thunder Liger, whether it's wrestling the likes of British wrestling and TNA wrestling legend Doug Williams, Gangrel, Carlito, who's back in the WWE, Chris Masters, Paul Burchill. I can go up and down the list of wrestlers you might be watching on your TV station or WWE Network, Peacock, TNT, whatever it is. But most importantly, he is now the newest member of the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. His name is Dean Allmark, and there is no other person I could think of that is more worthy than this man. He is also back as a coach and a trainer where he certainly belongs for Call Wrestling coming up here Wednesdays from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And that's only for 15 pounds. Think about this. Only 15 pounds could give you the opportunity to learn from one of the greatest wrestlers who has done it all, traveled in Italy, France, Japan, even wrestled for that little company called Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. You get a chance just for 15 pounds. I talked about being bored at Napoleon's, would have spent double that. I would have talked about going out and buying two slices of pizza and a bottle of soda, and that alone would cost nearly what Dean Allmark is going to give just for a little 15 pounds. That's what you're going to get. You're going to learn from wrestling royalty. So make sure you go out there and also support this man on all of his platforms. He even just joined Threads recently. Go out there and watch his content. Go out there and watch him, ask him. He is certainly taught the best. He is the best. And that's why you need to support everything that this man does. And RPD, I know you're listening, so definitely want to make sure that we see you and him square off. And also certainly want to make sure we wish everybody a happy holiday. But I want to give you the floor. Now, I could ask you thousands of questions, but my voice is actually starting to actually lose a little bit because I actually have to go on later with another wrestler. So let me make sure I recompose myself.
It's
But
that intro.
yeah, everybody says, I always say there's one thing I'm going to be known for. It's not going to be who I've interviewed and how many people and how many times I've done it. It's the introductions. That's it. That's all I'm going to be known for. Nothing else, which is fine. I would rather be known for something rather than nothing. So I'm happy I'll be known for that. But the pressure is always on. When you come back on next, it's going to be like, well, how does he top that one? How does he top this one and that one? So the pressure is always going to be there. But that's what I'm going to be known for. Certainly the lovely Xena definitely likes it. So hopefully that she'll decide, kind of like how Antonina has decided about you, that she'll decide about me because she knows that there's nobody around that gives those intros like yours truly. But that's here nor there. I do want to give you the floor. I want to give you any closing thoughts, anything else you want to plug, share, or say. It is obviously, sir, been a tremendous honor to have you on this platform once again. I want to thank, by the way, before I do that, Mr. Luke Hardy, aka Mr. Leyland, as always, because if it wasn't for Mr. Leyland, I would not be here with you. So I do want to appreciate from the bottom of my heart, Mr. Leyland, and I can't wait to have Mr. Leyland back on here for round two. But until then, the floor is yours, my friend. Fire away.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's a huge honor to be inducted into your Hall of Fame. And yeah, just have a really good, happy holidays, everybody. Hope everybody gets all the gifts that they truly want. And just be giving, guys. Just be giving. If you've got it, please give.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of the ACDC song. If you got blood, you got it. I think it's the name. So maybe now don't give blood to people. I mean, I know people probably need blood, but definitely if you got something, definitely give it. I mean, if it worked for Bon Scott, it could definitely work for you. But obviously, we certainly cannot wait for the future. I certainly cannot wait for 2024 with you. I know big things are ahead. I'll be looking forward to seeing who you teach and call. We'll definitely talk about that. And congratulations on a year well done. And by the way, I'm glad you aren't retiring after all, because that was the first thing we talked about. Last time we spoke about you potentially retiring, you threw that out the window. And now we've got something else new, that you're back to teaching and back to coaching and training. And I hope that next time out in a few months, we'll have you and Mr. Davis announce, kind of, because every time you come on, there's something new. And not always talking about the past like every other podcast you do, because I always like to freshen things up. So I have no doubt when you come back on in a couple of months, we'll have something else new and improved and fresh to talk about you, sir. So that's my little
Yeah.
food for thought. And thank you as always. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Festivus, Three Kings, Kwanzaa, everything else, and a bag of chips, like the legendary British DJ Downtown Julie Brown used to say. So I hope you like the British reference I had there for Julie Brown. So I thought that was kind of funny. But thank you and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Ladies and gentlemen, the newest member of the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame, Jumping Dean Allmark, who is now going to be teaching for our friends over at Call Wrestling, and he's going to be there Wednesday nights from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. British Standard Time for 15 pounds only. So make sure you follow them at Call Wrestling. Dean was also back in the ring against his old friend James Mason for Top Rope Wrestling this past Sunday. We also saw him at Undisputed November the 18th, and you'll see him, I'm sure, in the future in 2024 many, many times ahead. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice of all wrestling, the host of the Sports Report, the owner of Sportswire Radio. And if you're on sportswireradio.org, you will go back to your regularly scheduled programming, probably Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer, like the British reference there. And I'll also be back here at 9 p.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Big Tex of Dominating Breakout Wrestling. But until then, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, on the number one global radio station that is Sports Wire